And this is the first opportunity that I'm getting to explain myself.
It was not justified because he just took his own decision.
A criminal can never say he or she is a criminal.
The whole situation should be judged based on the evidence rather than just speculations.
All evidence is pointing at, him being at the wrong. But anyway, we were not expecting him to say anything different.
Testimonies given at the Ad Hoc Committee, very much in sharp focus once again. It's topical, and it starts right now. Good evening to South Africa, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, another eventful week of testimonies before the Ad Hoc Committee probing allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Two men at the center of the allegations put forward their side of the story, Shadrack Sibiya and Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who is currently on special leave. Now, the Political Killings Task Team, once again, in sharp focus. Mchunu asked if a political intervention can establish a task team, why can't the same political intervention be allowed when it comes to disestablishing the PKTT? So I guess the question is, that which is born out of a political intervention, can it be killed, or as the minister said, unborn or disestablished via a political intervention? He believes he didn't do anything wrong in terms of acting outside of the Constitution and outside of legislation. It leads us to the question of the week, and we're asking you, did Minister Senzo Mchunu's testimony convince you, or has it raised even more questions? We would love to hear your thoughts on this at SABC News_TV. Trying something new tonight, opening up the lines for you. We want you to give us a call, please. 011 714 0677 7879 011 714 0677 7879. The number will come up on your screen periodically over the show, over the next hour. Please do call in. Let's walk and talk, get you some context at the magic wall. So, what stood out for you during the week's testimony? Still more to come in the following week. So we'll hear from MPs as they, some would say grill the witness, Senzo Mchunu. We would love to hear what you have to say at SABC News_TV. Also, we're opening up the lines. Don't forget, Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you context, and as always, we'll turn to the magic wall, what we know and why it matters. But just before we get there to the magic wall, an update from the Madlanga Commission. We're told that they will hold hearings partially in camera from tomorrow until the 22nd of October. Witnesses A, B, and C will take the stand off camera from a remote location, but with voices audible. We're told public and media will be able to access the auditorium at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, where hearings will be taking place. And the proceedings will be live streamed, and the witnesses' exhibits will be displayed live on screen as the witnesses testify. The transcript of the witnesses' testimony will be publicly available after the witnesses have finished testifying. The Commission's evidence leaders will explain the rationale for this whole arrangement at the start of the proceedings. So we'll hear more tomorrow on this. Now, for key takeaways from the Minister Senzo Mchunu's testimony, he states that he has nothing to do with criminal syndicates and has had nothing to do with them in the past. Not once, he said. The argument being made is that the minister wanted to disband the PKTT to protect criminal syndicates. His response, he said he wanted them, the syndicates that is, but not to protect them. Going on to say that this directive came from him as Minister of Police and not anyone else. Minister Mchunu saying that he believes he didn't act outside of the Constitution and outside of the legislation. We've got the better minds, the legal experts on this. We'll get their take in a short while. He also believes, the minister that is, who is on special leave, that the decision to disband the PKTT was for lawful reasons and not for unlawful reasons. What about on sending the directive on New Year's Eve? The minister said that he knew the commissioner was on leave. That's why he also sent it to the person that was acting. But ultimately, he said he wanted a situation when they go back to work in January, they have a sense of 3 issues that he has lifted from a maze of other issues. And a way must be found to focus on these issues. Now, the minister also went on to explain to the committee about the categories of murder inside. Part of the explanation the minister gave to the reasoning of, I guess, re-looking at the PKTT listed for 4 things: organized crime, organized murder, that is, or assassinations, taxi murders. You have political killings and you have personal killings. Now, Mchunu said that as Minister of Police, you are presiding of over, 120 billion rand, right? And you have to think about the most effective way to distribute and use these resources. So if you continue to fund one unit somewhere in one corner of the country, he says, even if they do well, they're not going to deal with criminality, for instance, in the Cape Flats. That's the example he used. So he says what they were trying to do is to address this even-handedness throughout the country and still be impactful, still be effective. That's what he had to say with regard to that. Now, I want to take you to this recording that's been very much topical, the other issue that stood out for us here, the recorded telephonic conversation, allegedly, right, between Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi and Senzo Mchunu's Chief of Staff, Shadrack Sibiya. And the alleged call was apparently recorded earlier this year and formed part of Mchunu's submission to the committee. Mchunu says that he advised his Chief of Staff that he may want to record the conversations with Mkhwanazi because he referred to something called threats. Take a listen.
It's me who advised the Chief of Staff to say, you may need to record your conversations with General Mkhwanazi because of the threats. Part of what they discussed was what I thought was going to come here to say, if the minister is clean, knows that he's clean, he can then proceed with the disbandment. And to me, that was a threat.
Now, businessman Brown Mkhotsi's name comes up again. Senzo Mchunu says he knows him. Here's Mchunu's version of events.
You must correct me that you do know him, or you know of him, Brown Mkhwanazi. You're nodding yes?
Yes, I know him. I never spoke to Brown Mkhwanazi in this period, particularly about the disbandment. How he got to know, how he got access to the letter, it is better explained by him.
Okay, we will discuss this further with our guests in a short while. Remember that number to dial is 011-714-0677-7879. We'll be taking your calls in a short while. Now to our regular word on this feature. Took to various streets of Johannesburg seeking diverse insights and perspectives on this topic. And this is what people had to say.
I feel like they should just get the evidence, make sure it's solid, and once it's solid, then they can them for all the things they've been saying. I'm not saying it's innocent or not.
To be quite honest, right now, everyone has their own personal agenda that they might be pushing, so we may not be sure either the person is right, truthful or not.
He's the one who took that decision, to cancel that PKTT. It was not justified because he just took his own decision by then. Now he's defending himself.
What I can say is a criminal can never say he or she is a criminal.
All evidence is pointing at, him being at the wrong. But anyway, we were not expecting him to say anything different. I mean, anyone would not just come there and say, I know what happened and I'm at the wrong and all that. So he would obviously deny it.
The whole situation should be judged based on evidence rather than just speculations. So that's what I think. I think there has to be a thorough investigation on the case, then decide whether he's corrupt or not.
In terms of our constitution, we are innocent until proven guilty. So let them come with their testimonies. Most of them, they're going to testify, but by testifying, they'll put themselves in a corner.
All right, we've got lots to discuss. Let's get to it. In terms, from a legal perspective as well, some of the utterances that the minister has made. We will break it down for you with our guests. We have in studio, for this legal perspective, we had Advocate Jazz Vilakazi, one of the coolest names on the show of to date. Thank you, sir, for joining us. We need your better mind as well. We also have the CEO of the IRS Forensic Investigations, Chad Thomas, as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll be joined in a short while by other guests, and I'll let you know in a short while. But firstly, Advocate, let me bring you into this conversation. Look, it's not a court of law.
Yes.
But we have an evidence leader posing questions to the witness. What did you make of the interactions or the whole engagement so far with Advocate or Senior Counsel Arendse as well as Senzo Mchunu?
Blaine, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I suppose that now that we're close to matric exams, if I had to grade the minister, he'd probably come out around 30 to 40%. It was quite a heated, at times, interaction between SC Arendse as well as the minister. And one of the takeaways that I got was that the minister was struggling to give perhaps coherent or sometimes straightforward answers. And I think there's plenty of examples in that regard, how he knows some of the underworld figures, for instance.
Right.
And he's passing between know of and know the person, never have spoken them. What exactly is the answer then?
Chad Thomas, was Minister Mchunu direct enough for you?
Oh, no, most definitely not. In fact, none of the witnesses have been anywhere near succinct as Mkhwanazi was. When one listens to even Masemola Khumalo, what goes to Mchunu Sibiya, none of them have been as coherent, none of them have been as consistent, and none of them have been as calm under fire as what Mkhwanazi has. Mchunu leaves us again with more questions and answers. And one of the things that was a major takeaway for a lot of us that's been watching this is the fact that he came across as somewhat arrogant to say that, well, look, I made this decision. I never had to consult with anybody else, and it was mine and mine alone to make.
We're also joined by Analyst Thembisa Fakude, who's joining us. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Look, there's one thing of the verbal articulation, right? The actual answering of the questions. But what about the non-verbal articulations, the demeanor of the witness, the way he came across as, I guess he'll be compared now to the first witness who came across as somebody who is confident in his answers. What do you make of the minister's disposition?
Well, I think the public is shortchanged in this regard because articulation doesn't mean truth. And articulation doesn't mean that a person is telling lies. So we are, at the moment, comparing an articulate General Mkhwanazi versus other witnesses who have not been that articulate, at least in English. And for me, that's problematic because it has sent already a wrong message to the general public. If you speak to most people, everybody's singing the praises of General Mkhwanazi simply because he was articulate.
Yeah.
So that's one. But the other part, of course, is that we've got these parallel processes that are taking place. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not quite sure what's the use of these two parallel processes that are taking place. The third part, which I think is also very important, is the members of parliament or members of that committee, most of whom are not fit for purpose. It's all emotion, and all of them, of course, have already made their mind either in favor of Mkhwanazi or in favor of Minister Mchunu. So I'm still confused right now, and I don't have a strong position, but I think we need to be careful about using articulation as a measure of truth.
Many South Africans who are watching this, some of whom would have already came to some sort of conclusion, given the history, etc. But where are we for you, Advocate, in terms of, look, it's just 2 weeks now for the Ad Hoc Committee. We heard some testimony given at the Commission. Is there room to start joining the dots, so to speak, or is it far too early?
Well, it's always situation dependent.
Yeah.
Even a judge has the right and, in fact, starts to form an opinion as he hears the evidence. And it's always up to the party who is giving that sort of evidence to try and convince the judge. And in this case, this is a court of public opinion. And it's not per se a bad thing for South Africans to start putting the dots together.
Yeah.
Because let's be realistic about it. We have, on the one side, as the former speaker said, a very articulate, very strong person who clearly knows what he's talking about. And then we have for perhaps the minister, perhaps Sibiya, who have not really handled these questions well. And let's not make a mistake about it. A witness can be coached, and it happens a lot when witnesses have to come up in tribunals or even courtrooms. So we are now, for me perhaps, what I think South Africa as a public is starting to see, we are starting to get to the bare essentials the bare essentials of this matter.
Right.
And it just simply comes down to, well, did what the minister do, was that legal in all senses?
Right.
And South Africans can start to make up their minds in that regard. Nothing wrong with that.
What is your opinion on that?
So I think one has got to take it back to why did the task team start and at whose did the task team start? So we know that there was the commission in KZN, and from that commission then the president himself then decided to put together the IMC, I believe it was, and then the task team was born. So in effect, what we heard, for instance, from the minister this past week is him saying, when talking about the disbandment, is I briefed the president. But what Aransa SC was saying, well, it would appear that you actually just told the president what you had done and that the president wasn't intimately or intricately involved in this. So my view is I am not sure whether disbanding an operational unit falls within the mandate of the minister.
Right. Chad Thomas, Mkhwanazi did mention that he briefed the president after the directive was issued. Do you think this now forces the president to appear before the Ad Hoc Committee or the Madlanga Commission in order to set the record straight?
Not necessarily. The minister formed part of the executive by being appointed to the cabinet. He alerted the president to his decision. Whether or not the president knew whether or not he had followed the correct protocols, consulted with the other parties, which we now know he didn't, is not really that relevant at this point in time. What Mkhwanazi did, and Mr. Fakude, as much as I agree with you about the articulation side of things, much of what Minister Mkhwanazi has said has actually been in support of the allegations that have been made by Mkhwanazi, that this was done without consultation. Tick. That this was done as a one-man decision. Tick. You have a situation now where the majority of the allegations that were made on July 6, where Mkhwanazi had followed processes from January all the way through to July are now being tested in the court of public opinion. And it seems as if the balance of probability still rests on his side, because we haven't heard from Vusi Madlanga as yet, but there's evidence at both the commission as well as the ad hoc that seems to support Mkhwanazi's version. We haven't heard from Brown Mkhwanazi yet, who's integral in all of this, and what we've seen at the ad hoc as well as at the commission, again, support Mkhwanazi's version. So I don't think we need to drag the president into this at this stage. There's still too much to go through. The president, I think, was a tick box exercise for the minister. That's who he ultimately reports to, and he told the president of this decision. And like I said, whether the president knew whether or not the protocols have been followed is irrelevant. He's taking what is said to him by a minister that he's appointed at face value.
Right. Mr. Fakude, Chad Thomas mentioned something very interesting in terms of the court of public opinion. And I wonder to what extent would it have a material impact on the people that are giving evidence, the Mkhwanazis, the Sibiyas, the minister. Do you see, for instance, the minister resuming his duties after what has been said?
Well, that's going to be up to the court of law. Again, who or where does the buck stops in this regard? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, nor a judge, but there's a court of law where all of this evidence must be presented, and I think it's going to be the court of law that will eventually and is qualified to judge who is responsible and who was not responsible, and who's guilty and who was not guilty. But for us, where we sit, again, we are informed by articulation one, but importantly is the court of public opinion, which as you go along, and the whole weekend we've been discussing this with friends and family, and clearly so far General Mkhwanazi is the one that's favored by most as the most truthful. But the reason why he's truthful is because of his confidence, his demeanor, and how he presented themselves. But we still don't know precisely what the court of law will, which position they will take in this regard, because I think ultimately it's going to be them who's going to take a much more informed decision, a much more educated decision and position in terms of who was guilty, who's not guilty, and where the buck stops. And at the moment, all of us are questioning whether is it with the National Commissioner, with the Minister of Police, or with the President. So I need clarification in that regard, and I'm not a lawyer, but until we get that clarification, it's, I think, premature for any of us to take any serious and informed position in this regard.
Well, lucky enough, we have a lawyer in the house, so let's put it to Advocate Jazz. Look, this is, of course, this is not a court of law. The commission, the committee, not a court of law. But from what you've heard, is there enough sound legal argument that the minister is putting forward that could stand the test in court?
Well, look, I've gone and I've looked into the Constitution, and starting from Section 199, which speaks about there being one police force. And then you move on and you look at what the Constitution says about the police itself. What it says is that, in a nutshell, it puts the day-to-day management, the operations, at the door of the National Commission and not at the door of the minister. The minister, being a political oversight, being the political, simply the political authority who's there to consider policy. But what we are seeing is that we are seeing a unit which is operational in nature, having been disbanded by somebody that I don't think has got the requisite powers in terms of the Constitution. And I think that the minister then has struggled, in effect, to put forward a cogent case. Number one, the minister says it was for budgetary reasons. But that is not what he writes in the letter of 31st December, which is sent at such an odd time of the year that in itself must be questionable. So I'm not of the opinion that the minister can overcome this hurdle, because it appears to be a bridge too far for him. And he's struggling to just come to the fore and say these are the actual reasons.
Yeah.
Because what is put forth at the moment, for me, is not convincing, and I don't think for the members either.
Well, is there a argument to be made that there's a misunderstanding with regards to the word immediate? Because I think that's become very much in sharp focus. They gave the example of just you can't just stop the car and jump out. There's a process,
Yes.
and he intimated that he wanted the commissioner to
Yes.
have an understanding of where he's coming from,
Yes.
of these three top issues that he needs to be executed within the month. Is there some grey area with regards to that word?
Well, people would like to think of it as being grey. However, let's make an example. A child is being taken by the father to Australia and the mother rushes to court.
Yeah.
And the court sends out an order that says, stop that plane immediately. What does that mean? It means that the plane cannot take off. And according to my understanding, the National Commissioner was on holiday at that time. So he's sending an email to an empty office, as it were. Secondly, he's disbanding it immediately, meaning that there is no work that can go on insofar as the objectives of the task team were concerned. So I don't think that there's much to be made of the word immediate. And I also see that there was also the issues of some feedback that he wanted. But those were quite, for me, querisome because you've had quite a long period of time in which to make these decisions, in which to consult. And if you look at the reasons that the minister gives in terms of disbanding, one of them is, I heard from my deputy minister, I heard from influential journalists and civil society that we could be sued as the political task team. And on those grounds, I've stopped it as well. But does that really make sense? I mean, there will always be some sort of action against the government that is involved in the safety and security of the Republic. But you could not preempt it based on rumors because there was no factor that was before him.
Let's open up the lines, get a sense of what South Africans are talking about. Give us a call, 011-714-0677-7879. That's the number to dial. We have Dimakatso on the line. Dimakatso, a very good evening to you. What's on your mind?
Very much. I think our legal expert here has highlighted some crucial information in regards to the testimony of the now suspended minister. But first, we need to consider two things that have transpired within his 2 days of testimony. The first is that he hasn't presented a coherent case. Yes, a public judgment can't be made right now with the current information that we have, because that would be premature. But we're sitting at a point where the minister cannot present a coherent case. First of all, he says he had a dialogue with, or conversation or consultation, whatever he wants to present it as, with the president. And he says it's in his affidavit that he has presented before the Ad Hoc Committee. But one thing that isn't there, that he's unable to present, which he has done with other cases of that he attended the January 8th statement and so on, is that he fails to tell us when he met with the president to have this consultation, but he also fails to tell us that to show some form of coherent leadership in saying, let me go consult the people who deal with the day-to-day runnings of the political killing task team. And he, again, our legal expert has highlighted this very clearly. I don't think I have any more to add to this, but to say that he says his decision is based off of individuals in civil societies that have been presenting some evidence to him, to his office. But what he fails to understand and also present is that he hasn't presented all this information and evidence before, when it has first reached his table to say, okay, we need to do something about this following information.
Right.
So he hasn't consulted both the committee in Parliament or the executive to say, this is the information we're receiving about the current political killings task team, and we need to deal with it effectively. So there are gaps within his testimony and the testimony of Shadrack Sibiya, again, that are interlinked in some form of way, because General Mkhwanazi implicates both of them within the disbandment, or this illegal disbandment that General Mkhwanazi paints to the public of South Africa.
Right. So, thank you very much indeed. Your point is well noted. We'll put it to our guests in a short while as well. Let's hear from Tabile. Tabile is on the line. Tabile, very good evening to you. Your question?
Greetings to the SABC, the esteemed guests, and the fellow listeners. Personally, I found Minister Mkhwanazi's testimony quite interesting. Firstly, it is important to point out that the appearance has laid an important foundation for the rest of the Ad Hoc Committee. And this is not only because Minister Mchunu was one of the key people of interest, but also because we can now start to properly formulate a timeline of events. The committee in general will be able to trace the decision-making, identify potential misuse of power, and to discern whether there was outside influence or interference. In fact, on this point specifically, I personally would like to know in particular how ordinary citizens managed to get a hold of important police information, such as knowing that the PKTT had been, in inverted commas, disbanded, and that the 121 dockets were taken from the task team's headquarters.
Yeah.
And then we also need to know the exact date of these claims and the claims that were made. And we also need to find out about whether the minister knows or has any relationship with Kat Madlanga, Brown Mokhod, or Hangani Maumela. So, in general, the question I would have for the guests the question I have for guests would be, what does this case tell us about the internal power struggles within the police cluster, particularly between the ministers and the respective commissioners? And this includes deputy national commissioners.
Right. Tabila, thank you very much indeed. Let me bring Chad Thomas on that note. Look, it's pulling back the curtain a bit, right? These hearings, both at the Madlanga Commission as well as the Ad Hoc Committee, giving us a sense of what is going on behind the scenes. A society needs to have confidence in their law enforcement. Otherwise, we're doomed. But do you think, what sort of impact are these testimonies having on public confidence within our law enforcement?
Well, firstly, what we're seeing is the personalities behind the names. Yeah. We saw how Mkhwanazi was exceptionally dismissive of Major General Petronella van Rooyen, who is an expert in policing law, and not just that, she holds a doctorate and she's also studied constitutional law. Yet he dismisses her opinion out of hand and says that her opinion is wrong in terms of the decision that he made. We see that there is zero love lost between the people that have appeared before this commission. What we heard Sibiya saying was blatant, to the point. He does not like Mkhwanazi. Mkhwanazi does not like him. We heard Mchunu saying that Mkhwanazi was making threats and that he got somebody to record him, his chief of staff, in fact, so that he would have this proof because he felt that something like this would come about. This is not good for us as the public to see. We don't want to see the top leadership of the police, both operational and political, at war with itself. Because if they're at war with it themselves, the only people that are going to win are the criminals. So I think for us as a people, this has been an eye-opener. It's a reckoning that we needed. And this reset has been long in the making.
Is it necessary, though, Mr. Fakude, when generals fight, there are consequences, right, for a nation, for a nation's security? What are the possible consequences here?
Well, importantly, the confidence that all of us want to have from the police. And the testimonies of the past couple of days has raised a lot of concerns in terms of whether we should trust these people and whether these top generals are really fit for purpose. If you listened to how, again, articulated themselves, whether it was General Masemula or Sibiya, I'm not quite comfortable anymore about the capabilities of the police. One, in terms of understanding policy laws that govern their fraternity, these people seem to be totally out of touch with what they're supposed to be doing. But importantly, there is a lack of confidence that we saw from General Mkhwanazi, for example, who speaks with confidence, who speaks with clear understanding what's expected of him. And unfortunately, the other witnesses that have been called so far have been disappointing, and also makes you not sleep quite comfortable at night if you're going to have such top brass within the police who do not really understand what is their role and the powers that they have. They're all very, very hesitant in terms of taking positions and really confessing on what's happening and articulating positions. And when General Masemula had to eventually say he did have a conversation with the president, it was kind of drawn out of him. But you don't have the confidence that you saw from General Mkhwanazi, whom I think won the day and gives an element of confidence that if you have someone like that at the helm, you could sleep better at night. But the other three, unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what I'll say the same.
011-714-0677-7879. Have your say on It's Topical. Give us a call now. We want to hear what your thoughts are. What did you make of the testimony given by Senzo Mchunu as well as Shadrack Sibiya earlier this week? 011-714-0677-7879. Take your calls next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. I want to just remind you about the question of the week, and we're asking you, did Minister Senzo Mchunu's testimony convince you, or has it raised even more questions? Let us know at SABC News_TV. We're also opening up the lines as well. 011-714-0677-7879. Speaking about telephonic conversations, Advocate Jazz, we heard about this recorded telephonic conversations, allegedly, between Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi and Senzo Mchunu's Chief of Staff, Cedric Nkabinde. I want to understand the legalities of such a recording. What does the law say?
Right, good question. The law, in effect, takes two positions on it. The first one is, in the event that you wanted to record third parties and you were not part of that conversation, so think of a police sting operation, then the police would need a court order authorizing them to be able to record that conversation. However, when it comes to two individuals, as you and I are doing now, and we're talking to each other, you could record this conversation without having to tell me that you're recording this conversation.
Right. Chad, Mchunu alleges that the threat was if the minister doesn't withdraw, there's going to be a fight back. But he says he doesn't think that that part was recorded. What did you make about this whole recording?
I think it's a storm in a teacup. We know how Mkhwanazi is. We've seen him at the July 6th presser. We've seen how he's handled criminals in KZN. He speaks his mind. He's emotive. Some would say he's overly patriotic, especially in his stance regarding having to fight for one's rights. He made a comment during the July 6th presser that he has a firearm to protect himself, but vulnerable women out there don't. So I think it's just the way he speaks. And of course there's going to be a fight back. If something's not done, he's going to fight back. And he has fought back. He fought back by going to Parliament in March. He fought back by holding the July 6th presser. He fought back by speaking to his commissioner. So one has to interpret what he meant by fight back. And I think he's been very clear in the way in which he's fought back. He's followed processes and protocols.
Right. Mr. Fakude, how does that sit with you? A police minister advises his chief of staff that he may want to have some of these conversations recorded.
Yeah, well, it was a very dodgy statement, which for me invited additional doubts about, outside the letter being sent on the 31st of December when the National Police Commissioner was not available. Now you have this situation where the ministers say, well, I think you might want to record this because I know this man often could be implicating himself or implicating me. That, for me, was a bit problematic. You don't expect that from the Minister of Police. But again, we'll have to wait and see what will happen. So far, as far as I'm concerned, many people still believe that what General Mkhwanazi is saying is true. And those kind of statements, I think, have further added a cloud of doubt on the minister's testimony and others that have since testified, Commission.
I understand that we have Mpho on the line calling us. Mpho, a very good evening to you. What's on your mind? Your question for our guest?
Hi, Blaine. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Mpho.
So I think when we were having this a couple of weeks ago, one of my main concerns was how the outcome was going to look like that these hearings are not binding. And now that we've also constituted a parliamentary ad hoc committee, which is also not binding, I have, a legacy, right? So given that the parliamentary ad hoc committee, as well as the of inquiries often operate as parallel matters.
I'm battling to hear you. I'm sure the viewers at home are too as well. Let's try to get you on a much clearer line. We'll take your call back. Please do dial back in a short while. Definitely want to hear what you have to say. Maybe I can bring the issue of this political invention and some of the arguments being put forward by the minister, saying that, look, if a task team is born out of a political intervention, why can't it be unborn, so to speak, by a political intervention?
Yes, Blaine, that's quite an interesting argument from the minister. But let's look at what the task team's duty was. The task team's duty obviously was to ensure that political killings, traditional leaders, etc., in a way that sort of killing stopped. Now, whilst the minister might make this invention statement, it's quite curious that the minister comes out as the first reason that he gives to say this task team has achieved its objective. But there was 121 dockets which was still pending. So has it really achieved its objectives? And then secondly, insofar as it can be unwound, it can be disbanded politically as well, yes. However, the implications to A, the task team itself, B, the general police force, C, the area in which they are cordoning or at least working in, and 4, the entire structure of perhaps government, especially in terms of the president. One, then I am of the view, especially the minister, had a duty to go back to all of those parties, in effect, and not disband, but say to them, we are thinking of disbanding, and here with the reasons.
Right.
But here, as we understand it, the horse bolted, and all of a sudden then the president was then given a briefing that actually the task team has been disbanded.
Chad, do you see that as an offence necessarily, though? If a minister doesn't fully brief the head of intelligence, the provincial commissioner, the national commissioner, does that constitute an offence in your mind?
It's difficult. If there was a motive that we don't know about that can come out, then it could be defeating the ends of justice. If there was an intent to close down the unit for nefarious purposes, then yes. Also, from a civil perspective, you've got families that are crying out for answers. You've got a province that is in disarray. You're leading up to the local elections where we know there's going to be an increase during the next election cycle of violence. It's the norm in KwaZulu-Natal, and this unit seems to have been doing some good. But I think the greatest concern I have, and I said this at the outset of the insert tonight, is this unit was created as a result of an interministerial committee. This is a man that took a decision by himself without consulting the other ministers and without consulting the main role players. It was a decision that was made with very strange timing, and it was a decision made when this unit was now actively engaged in operations, not just in KwaZulu-Natal, but in Gauteng, and it exposed a greater murder for hire syndicate operating not just within the political sphere, but also within the business sphere and the entertainment sphere. So if it does come down to the fact that this unit was disbanded for a nefarious purpose and that there was an intent behind closing it down, not just because of budgetary constraints, or that there were other units that could close it down, then of course criminal charges could lead from this.
Right. Let's go to KwaZulu-Natal and speak to Makosini on the line. Makosini, very good evening to you. What's on your mind? Your questions to our guest.
Yes, how are you, sir?
I'm better than I deserve.
I'm all right, sir. I'm just trying to understand the question that is being asked on the television, that it says, is the minister giving a feedback that is convincing to us as a nation. My response on that one is that no, instead it's just create more questions than answers. With regards to that, he has gone into extent that he has some recording that is not known to the other party or the third party. Hence, that a person of this magnitude as a high profile in the country, he should have been doing that because he has to work transparently to the other part. Hence, that they are having a duty to look after the nation. So they have to be transparent to one another. To disband the political killing tasking, that was an unfinished business because the other party should have been involved so that they take a collective decision rather than to wait in silos. Perhaps now it shows that us as rural dwellers in South Africa that there is no transparency in the police in South Africa. With that in mind, it's talked to the credibility of the policing in South Africa that the credibility of the policing system in South Africa is distorted. So now instead of them become the protectors of the nation, now it means that they are at loggerheads for their own deeds. That it means now there is no coherence that can just give us that confidence as a nation.
Right. Makosini, thank you very much indeed for your comments and your input tonight. Let's go to Utando, who's calling us. Utando, very good evening to you.
Good evening, Blaine, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
Go ahead, Utando.
What we see here is that Mkhwanazi's testimony shows that you can't control what you don't know. The political killings past team should have been for restoring the country's faith in policing so that corruption doesn't win and there's justice for senseless killings that occur. So did he disband the task team because he wanted some sort of glory for recreating the same thing with his organogram? If he suggests that his organogram was an improvement to the task team operating in KZN, then later meant to be nationwide, how would it focus on murder of political figures if cases are dissolved in the SABC murder and robbery units? It's understandable that Mchunu wanted the task team to be under a more permanent structure, but the decision was clearly not finalized. So it seems like the task team was operating for years, unapproved, like a fly-by-night college in CBD, instead of an official policing unit. So whether funding from taxpayers, by the way, is used for good or bad, things are always falling through the cracks because of serious lack of efficient communication and moving in the same direction to avoid wasting resources such as time, money, and energy.
Utando, we appreciate your comments tonight. Mr. Fakude, Mr. Mchunu, Minister Mchunu will be facing off, so to speak, against MPs this week. What more answers will you be looking for this week?
Well, I think we got all the answers last week. There's going to be more probing this week from the MPs, but I don't expect anything new because, he's already put himself in a corner, particularly with that recording and the acceptance that he sent a letter on the 31st and it was his prerogative. I mean, that is going to be the bone of contention, and I think the MPs are going to press him on that one. But in terms of giving any different answers or revelations to what we had last week, I don't anticipate anything new or any breaking news from his testimony.
Right. Advocate, do you think his legal team or his advisors, political or otherwise, will be surrounding him and assessing last week's or this week's testimony and saying, maybe we should go in this direction in terms of style and substance?
I do think that they have a duty to do that because the prevailing feedback is that he did not handle himself as well as he could. And make no mistake about it, he had an advantage. He had already heard the testimonies of Mkhwanazi at the commission and had heard the other testimony prior to him coming to the Ad Hoc Committee. So he could have done better. I think this coming week, from my side, I think he probably needs to actually explain how an interdisciplinary task team can be disbanded as if it was just a as if it was just a police task team, because it wasn't. It was much larger than that. Then the second issue must be, well, explain to us as the general public, if not Parliament, how you say this task team had achieved its objectives when there was still 100 plus dockets outstanding. How do we marry that?
Chad, before I come to you, Chad, I'm told that Mpho is back on the line. Let's take Mpho and then I'll get some comments from Chad. Mpho, I hope the line is better.
I hope so too. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. So I wanted to ask that given the parliamentary ad hoc committees and the presidential commissions of inquiry often operate at the same time, or at least
on parallel matters of public concern, which are all rooted in different constitutional mandates. For example, 55 subsection 2 deals with Parliament's oversight, and 84 subsection 2 deals with the President's power to appoint commissions. So how can we ensure that these processes complement one another rather than duplicate each other? Because in practice, their findings are only advisory and they're not binding, yet both shape how the public perceives democracy as well as political accountability. So how do we prevent institutional overlap from diluting responsibility and instead translate these parallel mechanisms into these coherent, enforceable outcomes that are going to strengthen democratic oversight instead of exposing our procedural limitations?
Yeah. Chad, you can hear that the public is still grappling in terms of how to process testimony coming from Madlanga, testimony coming from the Ad Hoc Committee. What's your advice in terms of these parallel structures?
I think it's important to understand that they both serve a specific purpose. When we look at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, it's a lot more process-driven, and there's a lot more protocol involved. When we look at what happens at the Ad Hoc Committee, especially when it's the Q&A between the members of Parliament that form part of that oversight Ad Hoc Committee and the person that's being cross-examined, it's far more dynamic, it's far more in flux. They're not sticking to affidavits and they're not sticking to strict protocol. And I think what's coming out of this is that the public are now seeing how these different processes work. We were very used to Zondo. After seeing Zondo, we haven't had much to do in respect of our interest in ad hoc committees. And this is, of course, something that has taken the entire nation because it's something that's impacted on every one of us. Crime impacts on each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis. So I think that the Ad Hoc Committee is far more revealing in terms of the Q&A from the parliamentarians, and we need to let these processes follow, and we need to wait for the recommendations and see what the outcomes are.
Right. Mr. Fakude, is this the best route to take in order to meet the liabilities to South Africa's national security at a pace that doesn't hurt this nation in the process?
Well, I agree with what Chet is saying in terms of education and the public getting to understand exactly what's the role of parliamentarians and the difference between the commissions outside Parliament and the ad hoc committees work inside Parliament. But at the same time, there's also concern of the overspending in trying to get the truth or trying to get to the bottom of all that concerns us as South Africans. These two processes are clearly going to be extremely expensive eventually. And whether we needed them the way they are or not, it's another story. But I think the money involved, the budget involved in trying to get to the bottom of this is going to be of great concern. But when it comes to the general education and how these very complicated processes operate, I think it's been good to the general public for them to understand the responsibilities of ad hoc committees and what the commission is all about. And of course, it's been very entertaining, but at the same time, it's also been a political strategy to a large extent. Some people are saying that if anything adverse was to come out against Mkhwanazi, you're going to have a public uproar.
Yeah. Advocate Vilakazi, last word to you. In terms of substance, in terms of performance, is these processes beneficial?
Well, yes. And I think the general public needs to understand where each process sits. There's the oversight, obviously, by Parliament. But the Madlanga Commission, in fact, has got the bigger responsibility here. Yeah. At the end of the day, they need to come out with recommendations to the President. And we have seen somewhat in terms of the Zondo Commission, where some of those recommendations were put into effect. Yeah. Obviously, there's case law that states that a President does not have to accept the recommendations and may decide on a different path. However, this is the proper way for us to do it as a country prior to any litigation, as it were, starting against anybody who is involved in these activities.
Advocate, thank you very much indeed for your time, Mr. Fakude. Chad Thomas, never enough time, but value added, no doubt, to all our callers as well. No doubt these conversations will have to continue. The minister, who is now on special leave, is back in the hot seat before the Ad Hoc Committee this week. SABC News will keep you in touch with all the very latest. All right, before we go, here's my take. Show me a man and I'll show you his crime. An infamous boast attributed to this man on your screen, Lieutenant Sibiya, one of the longest-serving secret police chiefs during Joseph Stalin's reign. Yeah, basically bragging that he could prove criminal conduct on anyone, presume person guilty, and fill in the blanks later. It's probably a path we need to avoid, especially in the court of public opinion, for obvious reasons, right? So, we need to let the facts and the evidence lead us before drawing conclusions. What I'm looking for is concision and clarity. We have to cut through the noise, my brothers and sisters, and focus on the facts in our pursuit of better. Question: how or what is our best hope in this country? A strong police service, a strong judiciary, a strong government. Tick all those boxes and you have the basis for better, right? This is why these hearings are so important. It's seemingly, as I said earlier on, pulling back the curtain, giving us a window into a world we rarely get to see. Now, after looking through this window and we find things are bad, then we map out a strategy to fix urgently. That's how we get to better as a nation, determination and collective will to right the wrongs in our pursuit of better. Without that, we will remain divided, and divided we will all fall. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of Topical on YouTube, as well as on SABC Plus. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Unwrap Africa up next with Thembisa, followed by G20 Focus with Thulasizwe at 8:30 tonight, where he'll be asking the question, is energy justice possible in an insecure world? Stay tuned for that. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye.